Bigfoot Collectors Club presents
Wet Hot Alien Summer 3 Saucerama.
Saucerama.
I thought I saw a flying saucer.
Saucerama. Flying saucers.
Saucerama.
Beep beep boop boop.
Wait, that's one classic saucer.
Saucerama. You do the horse math.
Hello, everyone. Full of shame. I'm in shame mode because I have to re-record this intro because my mic was
You
bad.
better make it better than the first time.
Gotta make it better. You'll never hear it, everyone. Welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history, and we share stories, of course, of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
and our ultra-terrestrial producer,
Riley Bray.
Hi, boys.
Hi.
We're coming to y'all in the virtual clubhouse. We have boys scattered across the multiverse. But guess what? We have a great episode for you all.
Yes,
we
we
got
do.
one of your favorites, all-time Hall of Famer is with us
best.
back. It's the summer. We can't do it without this guy.
No, we're going big.
Because we're going big. It's Wet Hot Alien Summer 3. Saucerama continues all summer long here on the main feed and our Patreon, BCC, The Other Side. We're delving into the classic era of the flying saucer, the golden age of the UFO. My cat Biggie is killing a cat, killing a bug in front of my eyes, not a cat. Eating a bug. How'd it go, buddy? The golden age of the UFO, which falls between the years 1947 and 1960. Okay. Before we get into it, I want to remind everybody, tpublic.com/Saucerama. Get your merch. You can get it on hats. You can get it on stickers. You can get it on t-shirts.
Coffee mugs.
Our fun coffee mugs. Totes. You can get on. You can tote it. You can tote it in a Saucerama
Get
tote.
one.
It's all there over on our shop, tpublic.com/Saucerama. I'll throw up a little link in the show notes to this episode. Okay. Riley, let's nominate our 5-star Club Scout of the Week. This is somebody who left us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts because they're our friend.
They sure did. And the subject is, love the show, is much fun. I've been listening for years. Joining the other side at some point this year feels like going to 3 of your buddies' house and just hanging out, talking about everything spooky. I finished Jersey Devil Part 2. Personally, I'd lean more towards Elemental. I love the stuff so much, I'm thinking of starting YouTube just to talk more about it. 5 stars, do it.
wow.
Start your
Wow,
YouTube.
there you go.
So much. All right, our guest this week is a returning favorite. I'm sure they have an opinion on the Jersey Devil and whether or not it's an elemental. Maybe we'll start there. From What's Up Weirdo, please welcome paranormal investigator, author, lecturer, and professional weirdo, Johnny L. Tenney. Johnny. Welcome back.
Everybody.
Yeah.
You've got a very Doctor Strange facial hair going on right now. It suits you. It looks very
Looks
good.
cool.
It
Yeah, you look
adds to
good.
You look a bit. You look a bit devilish,
Debonair.
if I may say. Yes, debonair
Devilishly
as well.
debonair.
Yes.
I hate it. I hate it. I grew up like being told that someday when you're a full-grown man, you will have time every day to shave your face. And a
not
clean-shaven face is what I was like born into. And so growing this facial hair out is just driving me crazy.
Why are you looking so rugged
that's
these days?
wild.
It looks good.
I don't know. I'm getting into my weird professorial age. Yeah, I don't know what it is.
You,
You know,
need a
it's so
like
fun-
high
that
mystic
was-
collar.
That was always such a man thing to me. That people found the time to like do a clean shave every morning. Like I just was like, that took like 20 minutes. I was like, there's no fucking way I'm doing that every day. It's rare that I clean shaved every day. So I salute you for that. It's very manly. But this goatee suits you very well.
When I grew up, literally, I was told, when you are an adult, you will have the time every day to shave your face and make your bed. That's when you're an adult.
I love that. I do make the bed. Yes, I think that's an important
I don't do
step.
that
But
either.
I got in the bad habit, yeah. But yeah.
I got to do it. I'm bad at it. It's the one thing where I'm not very tidy. I will leave an unmade bed well into the day.
Oh,
Well,
you got to
this-
change that around. Yeah.
I'll
Go ahead.
tell you now. I'll tell you now. So over the years, my personal magical practices are always very mundane things that turn into something that I use as a magic ritual. And I realized one day many years ago when I was making my bed that I was like walking around, my arms were going up in the air, like flapping the
no
blankets.
way.
And I realized that in the 4 minutes or 3 minutes that it took to make my bed every morning, I could change it into a ritual where, like, I give thanks for having a safe place to sleep. I
love
remember all of the
that.
people who don't have safe places to sleep. Like, I thank all the ancestors
Wow.
for living lives to put me in the position I'm in to have a bed and a home. So,
That's cool.
like, making a bed became a part of my daily magical ritual now.
I love that.
I love that.
I
yeah.
might try adapting that. And,
Yeah.
my therapist says
That's
I need to
killer.
practice gratitude. So that's
I'm
one way to
taking
do
that.
it.
I do it because there was a speech going around by a captain, by an admiral something or another, but he gave a speech at at some college, but
Crunch?
his whole speech was about, and this guy was a former Navy SEAL, well decorated officer, but his whole speech was about make your bed. It's the first thing you can do to win the day. Make your bed. And he's like, because when you come home, you got a fresh bed that's made. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm taking that. And I sort of adopted that habit. But now, Tenney, I'm adopting yours, and I'm gonna you're so right. It's a opportunity rife to ritualize and give gratitude. What a way to start your day.
Get a lot of those little weird Tenney rituals that go on.
I dig it. Look, I teased it up. Tenney, we're not going to spend the episode on this, but we recently did a whole two-parter on the Jersey Devil. Elemental? Real? Bullshit? Bullshit or believe it on the Jersey Devil?
Fairy folk that has become a thought form.
Ooh, I love that.
Okay.
That's going to kind of set me up for some of the stuff that I want to talk about in this episode. So we can do a couple things here. This is where I turn into choose your own adventure host. I do have some
those
recent
books.
UFO sightings queued up that we can talk about, or we can just dive right in. Tenney, I'm going to hand it over to you.
I was promised 50s Saucerama.
Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah, don't disappoint.
Contactees and flying saucers.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna put the
Don't make
saucers.
him do all the heavy lifting.
I'm gonna keep the saucers out in the field. We're not gonna do a roundup right now. Let's talk about 50 saucer stuff. One of the things that I have been realizing when reading about this time period between 47 and 60 is how many, and we haven't done a full episode on this yet, so I'm shooting a little bit from the hip here. Maybe y'all can help me out, but how many UFO contactees really come forth in this period, and how much it feels like it is the next step from the theosophy movement in the 20s, 30s, like the Madame Blavatsky stuff. Like, there seems to be, before the alien
graduation of
grays,
sorts.
yeah, a lot of people are coming forward and saying, like, there's people from Venus who are teaching me about the ancient masters. Now, I'm referring specifically to George Adamski, who is a very peculiar guy, and a lot of people think he was full of shit.
Yes,
but
those
let's
photos,
start.
yeah.
Let's start there, because I really feel like almost as soon as we get flying saucers, not only do we get the weird distrust in government stuff, but we start to get like this cult following of UFOs, as if these aliens are here to save humankind.
Yeah, I mean, it all flows together. So like you can go from Theosophy and Madame Blavatsky and the Ascended Masters right into like the New Thought movement that was happening in the United States in the 1930s and 40s. And they're all talking about like manifesting your own realities and living positive lives. And all of a sudden you get the introduction of like Asian and Middle Eastern philosophies coming in, and that ties back again to Blavatsky. And then you have flying saucers. Now you've got a perfect like environment for saying like, oh, the ascended masters are from outer space, right? And so now like having a UFO contact or being in contact with the aliens is you being in contact with the ascended masters, the ancient gods.
Yeah,
It
and
adds
what
to
I'm
the
learning
story.
Yeah, it just builds. It's building the myth. So George Adamski was born in Poland and came to the United States when he was young, I believe, grew up on the West Coast. He was very involved or super into the Theosophy movement in the 30s. And then he went on for a little while to kind of run his own small cults out here in Southern California. He basically was like, he would tell the press, this is all around the time, Bryce, that like what's his face was Schufeld was digging for the lost city
the lizard
of the
people,
lizard
yeah.
people in
Oh,
LA.
right.
It's like
Yeah,
all
yeah.
around this
What a
era.
great time.
And Adamski ran, I can't remember what the name of it was, but basically he was like, I used to study under Tibetan masters. Like, I've got all the answers. And it was pretty clear that he didn't. He was also a bootlegger.
Right.
And he was really pissed later in his life that about FDR. He would say, if it weren't for FDR, I'd basically be a rich man because they ended prohibition. So he built a cafe at the base of a mountain. I think it's Mount Pomona out here. I have to double check that.
Mount Palomar.
Palomar, thank you. And basically ran a burger stand, and then in between flipping burgers would teach theosophy and teach about Eastern and Tibetan teachings and his big ideas
checks
about
out.
the masters. Yeah. So he's kind of like this old school hippie, but
That's
back,
what
and he's
masters
in
do.
his,
They flip burgers sometimes, you know. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm going back to the fryer, bro. Like,
And then-
back to service the people.
And then in November of 1952, he claimed that he and some friends saw a large cigar-shaped ship land out in the Mojave Desert here in California, and they spoke to a tall, gorgeous-looking male Venusian who telepathically communicated that he was one of these ascended masters that he'd been learning about his whole life. His name was Orthon, and that, you know, the world was going
name.
to end if we didn't do something about it. And I just find it's so fascinating that Orthon and the Venusians and all this stuff really seems to be like the Lemurians and the Atlanteans and all this stuff that has been sort of trickling in like into the new West Coast mythology for the first 3 or 4 decades of the 20th century.
Yeah, I mean, if you look like to this day, if you look at like ascended master paintings that people are still making, they're painting pictures of Orthon. They're painting like a pale-skinned, blonde-haired person with illumination behind
I've
them.
seen those. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
We've
mean,
all
it's
seen them,
stuck,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And Adamski thought that all of the planets in our solar system were populated, even though it was very clear, even by science up at that point, that was not possible. I mean, the pressure on Venus is like too strong. But we get this idea of this Venusian idea like goes on for a few decades. I mean, we have Valiant Thor coming in the 60s, that myth of him, and then Lanulos, where Indra Cold was supposedly from, has a lot of echoes of Orthon and Venus as well. And I think Woody
Right.
Derenberger even says in one of his books that he went to Venus.
Yeah, they were hot. Yeah, he was like, they were all hot.
You know? Yeah. And so what, I guess reading this stuff, like, I think it's easy for us to kind of wrap our brains around the idea of aliens being these small, big-headed things, and a lot of the contactee stories that come later, after Betty and Barney Hill, all seem to be more like Gray-like. But what do you make of this archetype of the tall, white, ascended master that's showing up? And of course, like, Adamski also took, like, quote-unquote photos of UFOs, which a lot of people are like, that's a lamp. That's like a lampshade. that he
vacuum
filmed.
parts.
So, yeah.
So the problem, right, is, and the the difficulty in discussing this era of UFO contactees is that it really, unfortunately, is all based in racism.
Yeah.
All of the Ascended Masters, all of the aliens are tall, white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people with beautiful sing-song voices and high technology, and they're here to save us. And everybody else is just like,
Doomed or
off the
damned.
map.
Right.
Yeah. And that comes a lot. I mean, there's a lot of that in theosophy. There's a lot of that in a lot of metaphysical readings, just the era that you're existing in. Even the science fiction books that are being written, the amazing stories and astounding science fiction that's in the 30s and 40s, like it's all very white-centric and Eurocentric. And so there's that aspect of it, which is really strange and difficult to parse out. But you do have contactees, because all of a sudden in the 50s you have so many. And although Orthon and his Venusian race is the one that kind of stuck, like, Joe Simonton says, when, with the pancakes from outer space, like he described them as like short little Italians,
right?
With
Yeah.
dark hair.
That's
Like,
what Betty and Barney Hill did too. They were like, it was like Jimmy Durante. Like they were like these little guys with like big noses.
Yep.
Well,
It's
I
very
don't. There's
strange.
a disconnect too, because they're all saying these ascended masters from Tibet, and I don't know a single white Tibetan. So it's like there's like a disconnect.
Well, look at portraits
there.
of Jesus.
Right. So it's like somehow it got disfigured, it got skewed. But I think there's this germination of truth about these people who lived ascetic lives, who went off into the caves and who did sort of ascend their own mind, and I think did sort of exist on a plane of knowledge that. And I think that's where people sort of get some of these ideas, like Madame Blavatsky. There were these ascetic cave dwellers who were mystics and who were able to ascend. But this whole white Venusian thing, it got disfigured, to your point, John, right along in that 50s and 60s melee of American racism, and it's so unfortunate.
Yeah, and you have, with Blavatsky, right? So, like her story, right? So she goes to Tibet and she learns from the Ascended Masters. And then you find that same
Who are
kind
not
of archetype. Right. You find that kind of archetype happening too. So, like Adamski, right? Like he's studied in Tibetan monasteries. And George King, who created the Altherius Society, which is a still ongoing UFO church. We have one in my city in Royal Oak, Michigan. I'm sure there's one out near you. George King, another British guy who went to Tibet and studied under the masters. Aleister Crowley, I went to Tibet and studied under the masters. Like it's always Europeans going to,
There's a theme,
the other continents
Eastern
to
mystics.
figure out what the mysteries are there and bring them back to Europe. But yeah, George King is a great contactee too, in the sense of like he went to Tibet and learned all the mysteries. Then he was contacted by Venusians, and then he eventually ends up channeling like Jesus, Hercules, Zeus, like just this weird like pantheon of real and unreal characters. But
A lot
that
of
church,
demigods in that one.
but like I said, that church every Sunday there's a service that the Altherius Society in my hometown, and I think they're all over the country still.
There's another case from South Africa in the mid to late 1950s of Elizabeth Clare. Do you know this story, Tenney? She also made contact with aliens from Alpha Centauri. Her spiritual leader was named Akon, who's the alien. And take a look at this guy.
Akon
He
and
just
Orthon.
looks like Peter Cushing from.
Yeah.
He's
I don't
another
like that guy.
tall white dude, and he's wearing like a high collar.
No.
I mean, this is not what we think of when we think of aliens in 2024.
No.
Yeah.
That's Bad Church
No.
Sunday is what that is.
Yeah, we're like he's going to lead like a corporate like team building exercise.
But you know what? That guy looks like George
Adamski.
Adamski.
Me.
He does. You know what? He does look like George Adamski.
Yeah.
That's true. And he looks like the alien from this all ties into The Day That the Earth Stood Still, which we watched recently. Like after watching that and reading this stuff, I'm like, oh, the alien, other than Gort the robot, like the alien who comes out of that ship is a tall white dude who's like, I figured it all out. You just have to be ruled by a space cop. But otherwise, you guys can join our utopian galactic society.
Another white savior from space.
There you go. I'll never, to piggyback off of this Adamski thing and those pesky UFO photos, I'll never forget I was listening to a Terrence McKenna lecture, and he talked about, how sort of everyone at that time, it was discovered that was made out of vacuum parts, this famous UFO photo. I mean, they pointed to the Hoover parts that it was made from. And lo and behold, McKenna was out in the field one day having one of his experiences high on mushrooms, and what came to him out of the fucking daylight sky was Adamski's UFO. Lo and behold, right there, just like the picture, and he knew in his mind that it was fake, but here right before him was the UFO presenting itself as Adamski's UFO. And so a conundrum in his mind began anew. It was like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, last year when I went to Giant Rock in California, and I went and I was like, well, they used to do lectures here all the time in the 50s. No one's probably done a lecture here in many years. So I'll do a 15-minute lecture to nobody just for the sake of Giant Rock being the place where all the contactees met.
Right.
So I did this little 15-minute lecture, and then right before I left, I looked up and I was like, what? I don't even get a UFO. I don't get any kind of flying saucer. And as I turned out of the corner of my eye, flitting away right behind the mountain was a tiny it looked like someone threw a hubcap, and I was like,
well, there you go,
Pete, it's exactly what I wanted.
Wow.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk more about Giant Rock. Okay, while we were on break, John showed us that he has an Orthon doll. So there's a collectible
spitting image.
And that's why he has the only silver laminated Club Scout card.
That's right. That is right. Very exclusive.
Giant Rock is great too, because that's where Adamski and all of their peeps would go hang out and, we'll look for UFOs, right? And the guy from the Integratron.
So you've
hung out with him as well.
Yeah, you've got George Hunt Williamson and George Adamski and Truman Duthram and all these people out there with the Integratron, and there's a Giant Rock out there, and they would just have these conventions. And it was like a UFO convention you go to today. People brought homemade T-shirts and homemade stickers and buttons, and they'd sit out in the desert and listen to people tell their stories about contacting UFOs and being in contact with extraterrestrials. Cool. And it went on for, decades.
Yeah.
It sounds like
That's
Sundance
cool.
before all the corporatism.
Or Burning Man, before the Burning Man.
Like an OG UFO convention, one that probably really rang true.
Yeah, and it was it's crazy because it was George Van Tassel who created the Integratron, which is like a meditation UFO center out there. Mm-hmm. He just bought it, because there was
nails.
What was that?
No screws or nails, right? The aliens gave them blueprints to it.
Yeah.
And they're like,
it throws the vibrations off.
Yeah, we can build you something that won't take a fucking screw or nail. Now, if you get blueprints like that from an alien, you're going to build that. Well, I probably wouldn't. I'm pretty lazy. But he did.
I'll make a bed, but I'm not building an Integratron.
I'll make a bed, but I won't build an Integratron.
But yeah, and then you can go online. There's a Life magazine photo archive that is searchable, and if you search Giant Rock, it's amazing how much it hasn't changed from today. People walking around with UFOs are real shirts, and people selling their books, and it's just exactly the same.
It's so cool. It's so funny. As a kid who grew up with the 50s being whatever I saw on Nick at Night, Donna Reed, My Three Sons,
Bewitched.
I realized how, even with a lot of the media back then that I saw, I realized how much of counterculture was really not presented that much in the mainstream, and you tend to think of like the hippie movement starting in the late 60s. But you read this stuff and you look at these guys and you're like, oh, these guys were just hippies, but before the term hippie was hippie, right?
Beatniks.
Yeah, beatniks. And there are some shows, like, if you look back, like Lassie, the old black and white Lassie, there's a UFO episode of Lassie.
Shut up.
No
And it's
way.
all-
What happens?
Wait a minute. We have to watch this for the Patreon.
Lassie, what
There's
is
like
it, Lassie? Ruh, ruh. It's a classic saucer. Ruh, ruh. Oh, no way. Take me to it. Ruh.
That's really what it is.
And they got Timmy.
And when they get there, there's like an army radar base.
No way.
Oh,
What's
yeah.
going on, girl? Who are all those guys?
So, I mean, you get glimpses of it in some of those shows. I've always had this idea. Here's a podcast or
The
YouTube.
Man from Mars, episode 195 of Lassie. By the way,
We need to watch that.
195? That's crazy.
There's a lot of Lassie.
A lot of Lassie.
But here's a podcast or YouTube if someone wants to do it. Almost every episode of every television show has a spooky paranormal episode. Like, that's something that people should look into. Like,
That's
there's
fun.
That's brilliant.
There's a paranormal episode of Three's Company. There's multiple ones of Love Boat that involve flying saucers.
You're just
and
giving it
psychics and
away for
ghosts.
free.
I'm telling you, just
Dude, that's a good idea.
A group of weirdos watching those shows and commenting on it. That's gold for somebody.
I mean,
sounds
never,
fun.
let us never forget the when the Bradys went to Hawaii on their Hawaiian vacation, and the curse of the idol that was around Greg's neck.
That's right.
Literally scared me as a child.
There's a alien UFO episode of Saved by the Bell.
God,
where they
that's
dress
so
Screech
good.
up as an alien, and the government comes out to do. The government says we're going to kill him and cut him open and find out what he is.
And
Wow.
I mean, Happy Days was so successful that it got its own spinoff. Mork and Mork
Wow.
was that episode of Happy Days.
Yep,
South
yep.
Park literally started with an alien anal probe abduction story. They kicked it off like that. Wow. Fascinating. There you go. That's a good
So-
idea. Take and run with it
I
if
love
you're
it.
out
Yeah,
there.
great. Yeah, go for it. So when do we kind of get out of the contactee movement that's happening in the 50s? It seems very much of this like evolution of theosophy. And when does it become like the alien abduction stuff that we know more about today?
Yeah.
I mean, that
Takes a
happens
turn.
after the hills, right? That's
Yeah.
that's later. The thing that is fascinating, though, I'm going to spin you back to the 50s.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Is you do have contactees who are having these experiences, maybe writing pamphlets, maybe showing up on the convention circuit here or there, who have not read theosophical texts, don't know anything about ceremonial magic, don't know anything about, the Golden Bow by James Fraser, like mythological stories. But they have stories, and then their stories, like, are weird enough to have archetypes within themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have, whether it's Orfeo Angelucci or Joe Simonton or the Mitchell sisters, like all of their UFO experiences, they also talk about like having to eat and drink stuff.
Yep.
Like that gets added in, and at some point, like all the contactees have to drink a strange liquid or they have to eat a strange food before they can contact the aliens. And then
Betty
you start
and-
wondering, then
Betty
you start wondering,
Andreessen.
you start wondering like, okay, so now is like the government involved and is like feeding people stuff or like dosing them, like that aspect. But then you also get, it's so fascinating to me. You get
good. I love a
tropes.
frustrated Tenney. This is fun.
You get tropes out of the 1950s and early 1960s that stick. So like, a good example would be, so I just wrote a fanzine about a contactee named Lee Childers. So Lee Childers, in the recounting of his tale, talks about how he went to a local bar and met an alien woman and they had drinks together. And that was one of his alien contactees. Like that story is used in the media for the next ad infinitum You will hear people making jokes about like, oh, you probably met an alien at a bar. You were probably at a bar having an alien. I think it's Ghostbusters 2. Bill Murray is like on his fake psychic show is talking to a woman and she's like, I met an alien at a bar. Like all those years later, like one aspect of one guy's story gets spun into making fun of contactees forever.
Well, that was also a big thing. Like Adamski would talk about how the Venusians were here. You hear that a lot of these contactees and the people who are proselytizing about the flying saucers. They were like, the aliens are walking among us. They're already here. They pass themselves off as human, and you've probably met an alien. That idea of the alien looking like us and being us is also there from the get-go. Where does that come from?
Yeah, Truman Bethram and George Van Tassel both, I think they both talk about when they meet the commander of one of the spaceships. Her name is Aura Rains, and she is a dark-haired girl who wears a beret. And she's supposed to be very voluptuous, and her sexuality is cosmic, they describe it. Yeah. That Life magazine photo archive that you can go and look through at Giant Rock, there are multiple photos where the photographer asked people, what's your name, what's your name, what's your name? Aura Rains, the commander of the spaceship, is in those photos. Wow. She gave her name as Aura Rains, and she's there, and she's exactly as the contactees describe her.
No way.
Whoa.
So do you think it was just some like cool hepcat lady hanging around the scene telling everyone that she's an alien?
I mean, maybe, or maybe like we all work in some form of media, right? So like you have to think 1952, 1953, like how many people are actually reading UFO books? How many people are actually looking at pictures from the UFO meeting at Giant Rock? Yeah.
Here's a sketch of Aura Rains. We'll put all this up on our Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club.
Very few.
Very
it's not that many people, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't understand when people say like, oh, these people were in it for the money. Back then, you weren't.
Yeah, what?
Like there
money?
was no money in this.
Yeah. In it for the hangs at Giant Rock.
It's 2024. There's still no money in it.
I was going to say, I don't see a lot of money in this. I'm speaking from experience.
I'm sort of ruminating on this transition you're talking about from contactee to abductee, and I'm interested in this aspect and sort of you mentioned this idea of exchanging liquids and foods. And to me, this sort of breaks off into two different ideas. One that you mentioned, you're so right. Like maybe this starts a little bit of distrust in not only the government, but the potential alien abductors, because we have experiments like MK Ultra, and there's a distrust in the government that's starting to percolate. But then you also have this other fork that takes me back to thinking of like Joshua Cutchin's work, who talks about food from the fairy gods and this exchange of gifts from the fairy. So that takes me back to sort of Valet's work, and I'm going, okay, so now there's a food exchange, and we're getting back into some of this old fairy stuff where you take food from the fairy and you don't leave their world. Is this an abduction? And so now it's sort of tying back. It's re-representing itself. It's weaving its way back into the fabric of society, but with a different tentacle. And so it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on board with that. Like the representation of itself. I mean, you can take it back to fairy lore with the foods and the food exchange, which directly goes back into old ceremonial religion. I mean, to this day, like there are people who have to drink every Sunday. They have to drink a certain liquid and eat a certain food, right?
Sacrament.
Yeah, to have a metaphysical exchange happening. So, like, it's still hardwired into people that there's something that happens when you break bread with someone else, you know?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it goes all the way back to the Christ story. I mean, the whole thing, the Last Supper, like this, there's something about this food being a sacred, or that food being associated with gods or otherworldly.
And I think, I think the church missed out on that one, like they do so many other things. You know what I mean? Here, so many people are taking communion and
More
they have
pancake
no idea.
breakfast.
They have no more pancake
Maybe a nice
space
lasagna.
breakfast. That's right. And they have no idea the implications or the ritual they're involved with and how to actually engage with said ritual. To them, they're just eating some weird cracker and some grape juice. Wrong. You know what I mean? Like and the UFO brings it back into our purview. It says, hey, I'm trying to show you something here. We're exchanging sustenance. Let's do that again. And it means you can be what I am and I can be what you are. Let's commune.
Yeah, and like food, like
Communion
is the most sort of like basic connecting thing of like all life. Like all, that's that whole like life feeds on life thing. Is like all life must consume life to create life. So it's like it makes sense that it becomes this thing that's like so deeply embedded in our own rituals and paranormal encounters. It's like the great connector.
Yeah,
well,
and if
what's
you
the name
talk
of
to
Whitley
a lot
Strieber's book, Communion, that's an interesting aspect of it too.
And if you read a lot of literature, anthropologists about like when did we become a kind of higher intelligent animal on the planet, is they talk about species that share food. Like food is meant to keep you alive, right? And so like to share it with someone else like actually is a higher form of thinking, because you're not only thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the other. And so that's like when animals start to transcend their own kind, right? You don't often see squirrels sharing peanuts.
Right, because that implies like self-awareness and then empathy for another being.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Trippy.
Cool.
I love it. Let's take another quick break. When we come back, I have a new theory that I'm going to float by Tenney. Okay, Tenney. I mean, this isn't gonna like blow your mind or anything, but I was.
Don't float a turd
don't
by
know
Tenney
that.
here. Float something good.
Yeah, let's hear this theory.
I think I got something here that we haven't thought of on the show yet. Okay. All these stories, talking about they were from Venus, they were from Mars, Martians, Venusians, all this stuff. We know that other species like us cannot live on these planets as they exist now. But it got me thinking. Let's say Earth has elementals, fae, beings that are born of and of Gaia or Earth. All right, I'm shooting from the, I'm thinking
this.
here.
He's cooking. Let him cook.
What if there are the equivalent of gnomes, angels, entities from other planets in our solar system, and they have actually figured out a way to project themselves here or travel here. And when they say, I'm a Venusian, they are a Venusian, but they're not the same type of physical alien being that we're thinking of. They're more of a spiritual elemental from that planet that has come to Earth because it's where all the activity in the solar system is happening.
I'm on board 100%.
Or it's some sort of or some sort of like parallel universe version of a Venusian. You know what I mean? If ghosts are possible, if aliens are possible, then isn't all of this is on the table, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I talk about in my lectures sometimes, because I just came back from Waverly Hills, so that's predominantly a ghost lecture that I'm doing, right? But I have to bring up everything weird when I talk about stuff. So it's like, let's imagine that there is an advanced Venusian race who are a couple million years ahead of us, right? They're going to be extinct by the time that humanity is on this planet, right? But in the millions of years, whether Mars, Venus, whatever planet, maybe even a different solar system, in those millions of years, they understand that traversing the universe in bolted together ships isn't how you traverse the universe. They become completely energetic, non-corporeal beings so that they can travel through the universe and continue to explore. Now you're talking about fucking ghosts, right?
Yeah.
So
you talked about the
ghosts.
ghost planet thing early on, so maybe this is coming
stuck
back
with
to
me
this.
ever since.
And so you've got aliens showing up here in a non-corporeal form, they don't want to freak us out. They are telepathic. They can read our minds, right? So they'll take the form of ancestors, loved ones, family members who have gone away, and they can answer questions and reveal truths to you in a form that's more easily acceptable because, it's grandma. It's not Orthon. It's not, Zontar 6 from, Hoo-Ha Planet.
Ooh, I love this. So they might even literally show up as a departed loved one.
Yeah.
Because if consciousness is going to survive, or if we're going to become immortal, like at some point, I don't care, even if like they cure aging, you can still get hit by a bus. You can still get eaten by a tiger. So ultimately, to become literally immortal, it's all about like, how are we going to get the consciousness out of our bodies into something that can exist outside of our body, right?
Right.
And if advanced civilizations have figured out how to do that, then they can basically do anything, and they can show up as exactly what you're talking about.
And I'll make this a little more, let's get even more kind of screwed up with it. So the most advanced chemically electric system that we know of on this planet is a human brain. It's a chemical reaction. There's electricity involved. There's all the moving of all these atoms and neurons firing, and it seems to contain consciousness, us, right?
Right.
If you apply that on a cosmic scale, a huge chemical reaction with huge EMF fields and neutrinos and every particle you can imagine, like, is also the sun, right? So let's say the sun has consciousness. And how would the sun's consciousness how would the sun's consciousness experience the solar system? Would it create dreamlike imagery and place it on planets? And have the beings on those planets interact with its own dreams? Like, I know that sounds wild, but
I love it.
Like the creatures we're interacting with might be manifestations of a larger consciousness, which is our sun.
Which is
I feel like
the Christ
Earth
story,
could be the heart,
right?
Yes. Oh my God, for sure. I love
the Christ story is a piece of the God who comes down to interact with us.
Yes.
It's this. It could be a metaphor for the sun projecting its consciousness into the solar system.
Yeah.
And
And
then
the sun gives us life. It's without the sun we don't exist.
Exactly. And the fact, like, when you start to like drill down on some of that, like if you ever look at a chakra chart, right? Like it looks like the planetary system, except it's going from top to bottom, right? If you turn it on its side, it like looks like planets lined up in a row, the way we describe planets. The other thing too is we know perhaps there was no. This is something I have asked anthropologists and archaeologists and people who study this who are way smarter than me. There is no reason anyone can really give a good answer to the first time the sun was looked at and someone said, "Oh, that's a man. That's Thor. That's Odin.
Apollo.
That's Apollo. That's
Helios."
If you take children up until the age of 5 and you show them a human-shaped doll and a ball and you say which one is alive, they will always pick the human-shaped doll. They'll never pick the ball. So what was it that made humans look at a ball shape in the sky and say that's a human being?
It's because it was wearing sunglasses, man.
Only at night.
Because it's cool.
That's
Man.
It is
question.
weird. Yeah, it is weird how we attribute that anthropomorphic, projection onto the sun. I never
and
thought about it that way.
whether it's stories about gods coming out of the sky or someone living in the sky or the constellations or representations of living things in the sky, like that's one of the archetypes. Something lives in the sky, right? And then the other archetype is even if you go back to Babylonian and Assyrian writings, there's a great guy named Irving Finkel who studies cuneiform and Assyrian and Babylonian writings. And he talks about the first ghost stories that we have written. So there's this other archetype that there is an unseen being and something of us that persists after our body drops away. Like 7,000 years ago, people, for some reason, were talking about ghosts.
Killer.
So we got ghosts and we've got UFOs.
Yeah,
Do you think that sort of
our brains are little mini suns, and our sun is the brain of our solar system. I think Earth is the heart, and Mars represents that big dick energy. That's what I think.
That's why it's the war god, right? It's the war planet.
Yeah. Well, so what do we look back on this stuff from the 50s and the contactee movement as like, and even with all the problematic stuff that is there, like, what do we do with it? Is it just fun? Is it just fun history now? Is there anything that we can take from this with us to go, oh, this can inform the way that we look at the phenomenon?
Or
today?
Or into the age of the Tic Tac.
Yeah, I think the most important lesson, so obviously there's going to be hoaxers in any field.
Yeah.
And there were hoaxers back in the 50s. But I think one of the things an important lesson, personal lesson that we can learn is during the 50s, whether these people had experiences or not, like, they were fearless in talking about it.
Love that. Love that.
Like, whether or not the experience was real, I will stand up on this box, I will stand on this stage, and I will tell people my truth. Like, no, I know that I'll be ridiculed. I know that I'll be laughed at. They'll put me in the paper and call me a wackadoo, whatever. I'm going to tell this story. Like, that's something that really needs to be done. When you look in the age of the Tic Tac, and we're only going to listen to military pilots, we're only going to listen to government people. Like, that's where we start to lose a huge amount of important additional information, is by not listening to the people who are just trying to tell their story. The story is where it connects us, right? And in the 50s, everybody was telling their story. And now you have an age now with, TikTok, obviously people are on there telling stories, and that's great. But when it comes to popular media, like, they only want to look to learned scholars. This man with a PhD, this lady who was a jet fighter pilot, this guy who was a jet fighter pilot, this guy who was in the military for 40 years. Those aren't the only people having experiences. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we realize we're all having fucked up experiences, they don't seem fucked up anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's true.
And you know what? To add to your point, all these cases around, these Tic Tac incidences and these jet fighter pilots, those are all just observers of phenomena. They are yet to talk to the actual experiencer of the phenomena, which is where the gold lies. And, to bring up Terrence McKenna again, just one more time, he often used to say, nothing is more real than experience itself. It is the primacy of reality. And who are we to nullify the primacy of somebody's experience? And you're absolutely right. I think we've hushed up too many people who are having insane experiences, but I think it's starting to open up a little bit, and people are starting to say, hey, I want to come forward with my weird story, and I'm hearing more like them, and maybe it's not so weird. And I think that's hats off to what you do, John, and hopefully what this podcast and others like it do too, that say, hey, we can champion the witness and the experiencer. There's gold there. And yeah, maybe a little fucked up and weird, but there's truth in there. Let's dig it out and find it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like you said, I hope that I hope it's getting better. I hope people are being more vocal about their weird. And again, I say this at my lectures. You don't need to be abducted by aliens every week. You don't need to be telepathic. You don't need to be psychic. Your weird story, no matter what it is, your weird dream, your weird synchronicity, that's good enough. Yep. It's not a contest. It's someone telling a fairy story, and someone says, I've never seen a fairy, but I had this premonitory dream one time. Like, that's the conversations that need to be had.
Yeah, and send those in to us at BigfootCollectorsClub@gmail.com. That's what the L files are all about. I love it. John E.L. Tenney, to be formal. Johnny T, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find your work? There's a lot to be found.
It's not that hard. I do a weekly podcast with my friend Jessica. It's What's Up Weirdo? It's available on all streaming services. And then my website is weirdlectures.com, and that has an events page where I'm speaking and showing up. And then all my Twitter and stuff, just John E.L. Tenney.
Okay.
You never cease
Great.
to amaze, John. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come entertain us Bigfoot boys. We appreciate you.
No, thanks for doing what you do and giving people a forum to talk about their weird stuff. It is really important what you do.
Well,
Every time you come here, John, I get this new kind of like big thought that's going to rattle around in my brain for the next 6 months to a year.
It's his gift to
So
us.
thanks again.
I'll carry you over till the next time Tenney's here, so I love it.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Come
Wow.
on. John E.L. Tenney.
Yeah.
He's the best. He's so fun.
What a ledge.
What a ledge.
So
How's that
refreshing.
sody pop price?
So
Yeah, there you
refreshing,
go.
that Tenney.
Okay, before we head over to Collector's Corner, let's thank some Club Scouts who have recently joined us over on BCC The Other Side. It's time
Let's do
for some
it.
Patreon shout-outs. Josiah Ewing.
Thank you, Josiah.
Cosmeteer.
Oh, welcome.
Sorry, I failed to mention his
Jumped the
Cosmeteer.
shark.
Fine.
Yeah.
We're doing great.
Stephen Rosenthal, Cosmeteer.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome.
Empty Pockets, Cosmeteer.
I see what you did there. Welcome.
Sarah Cohen.
Thanks, Sarah.
Libby Smith, Cosmeteer.
Thank you, Libby. Welcome.
Josie Lewis.
Thanks, Josie.
Wes Cobb, Cosmeteer.
Thank you, Wes. Welcome.
Ooh, I love this name. Michael B. Mayhem.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Michael Radzinski.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Matt McConkey.
Thanks, Matt.
Brown Ince, Cosmeteer.
Thanks, Braun. Welcome.
Francisco Turovsky, Cosmeteer.
Thank you, Francisco. Welcome.
Chad Colpitz, Cosmeteer.
Thanks, Chad.
Chad.
Jeez.
Welcome.
Bring 'em
Thank
on,
you.
these Cosmeteers.
Yeah,
Love
so
it.
many Cosmeteers.
And finally, favorite name of the week, Suburban Squatch, Cosmeteer.
Thank you,
And
Squatch.
I want
Welcome.
to circle back because I'm pretty sure Brown Ince is Brad Ince. So once again,
We thank all of you, man. You
I
patrons
like the
make
name, I like the
our
name
Brad.
day.
Braun. It's a good, strong name.
This is a strong name.
We appreciate you.
Join us at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock total access to BCC with 3 bonus eps every month, access to the entire exclusive episode archives to BCC Discord. You can upgrade to the Cosmeteer membership to unlock 3 music tracks from Ultra Producer O'Reilly and ad-free episodes like the one you're listening to right now. Okay.
That's the way to binge. Ad free. Do it.
Hell yeah. Let's go over to the Collector's Corner.
Okay.
I'll kick it off. I went to Robo Toy Fest
Yeah, you
over the
did.
weekend in Burbank. It was very fun. Bryce, you were gone, so I could
you
not
sent
invite you.
pictures.
Otherwise, you would have been there.
So jelly.
Lots of so much G.I. Joe stuff, so much fun retro toy stuff. And I want to give a special shout out to, there's some like, this 3D printing thing is pretty cool. There's like
getting
people
cool,
who
right?
are doing such fun stuff with 3D printing. I'm going to give a shout out to Tashi Station Emporium, who does these awesome figure stands, and they do G.I. Joe stands with the
What?
blast behind it.
No
So you can put your favorite G.I. Joe figure, like my Chuckles figure, gets to go up.
Joe.
It's really cool, and they have like
wherever there's trouble.
you got to check these out for Walker. They have stands for He-Man guys in good guy colors, bad guy colors. It's cool stuff.
Okay.
There's nothing like in the age of like digital times to just go and walk in a physical space and look at things that you like to collect or just look
Good
at.
toys, not shitty
in-
toys.
Yeah, with other people. I'm like, oh, this is one of the like this like a convention
These kids
is
these days have no idea.
well, but what my point is like a convention today is the same as a convention was 10 years ago, 20 years
Yeah,
ago,
right.
30. Like it's one of these things that you can still do.
Yeah.
It still feels like it did when you did it when you were a kid. So I'm like,
Well,
I
I
gotta
love
go to
that.
more like events like this and walk around and look at physical stuff. I love.
Well, I was going to say
Yeah.
you got to make the effort. You know what I mean? Because you can't just find it in your toy store, in your grocery store, like in the mall, like it used to be. If you want to get that good toy vibe, you got to go put in the effort and seek it out.
Well, just getting out and walking around, like going to like a garden or a garden show or a museum, just like doing these things.
No. Go to a toy store.
In the physical
go to like
space.
a old toy convention.
I get what
Fuck
you're
that
saying
shit.
too.
Go to a toy convention. That's what you need to do. Or a He-Man one. That's a good
It's
one.
about being in a space with a bunch of people that share your similar interests. It's a sense of society, community.
Fun society, guys. Get back out there. Bryce, Riley, you got anything in your collector's corner this week?
Since we're doing toys, I'm gonna.
Yes.
I got this guy recently.
Ooh, he's holding up a not a pedal. What
It
is
is
this?
pedal,
Is
but
it
it's
pedal?
for a
Death by
microphone.
Audio Turn Knobby.
Yes,
Ooh,
it's
cool.
the Echo Master by Death by Audio, and I just wanted to shout out Death by Audio. They're this pedal company that is the brainchild and run by this guy Ollie from a band called A Place to Bury Strangers, which is such a cool band that I've done a lot of shows with over the years, and Ollie's a friend, and it's just like if you're into like sort of weirder pedals, things that will go all the way past destruction and then see what comes after that. Death by Audio is for you. So
Great.
I've used their pedals a lot over the years, and I can't recommend them enough. And check out the band, A Place to Bury Strangers, and just go buy yourself a guitar pedal from Death by Audio. Don't buy it from some big corporation. Buy it from a cool rock and rollers that make them by hand.
Love it.
That's my corner.
Love it. Bryce, anything?
Do that. Watch this cool move. Hey, I'm gonna take a pass, but you know what? You're not. Why don't you let us know what you're collecting? You know how to do that? Hit us up on our socials like Instagram. Just comment on any old picture. We'll see it in the recent file. Hey, what's up, BCC boys? This is what I'm collecting. Do that because I love seeing those. Thank you for listening. We love you.
Yeah, I think we have a Collector's Corner channel over on the Discord, so
We do.
you can hang out and talk about it with your buddies over
One
there.
more
All right.
reason to join our Patreon.
Okay, we're wrapping up for this week, but remember, there are more Wet Hot Alien episodes over on BCC The Other Side. If we do not see you over there, we will see you back here next Wednesday for an all-new episode of BCC.
Sure will.
Until then, good night.
And go get regressed.
That hot you just did reminded me of Choopy. It's a real Choopy sound. Remember Choopy? Choopy! From the Showdown.
Choopy! Oh,
Little Chupacabra, yeah, little Chupi.
Nice to make it a little Choopy.
Bigfoot Collectors Club is executive produced by Michael McMillan, Riley Bray, and Bryce Johnson. Our show is engineered, produced, and scored by Riley Bray. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters. Follow them on Spotify. Want more BCC? For exclusive full-length episodes every month and total access to The Other Side, check out patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub.